Land.
Yeah.
Oh, what was the race shooting game?
What game?
Mario Kart.
Mario Kart. I used to like playing Sonic the Hedgehog on Sega.
Yeah, I remember those days.
Alex Kidd. What's the one?
Yeah. You remember when 007 GoldenEye came out for N64?
No.
I used to play Duck Hunt on 64.
And in 64, I couldn't work out how to use it. I was so used to platform games, it's like going, this is like, it's too complicated. I give up.
Although seeing the games now are pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah.
If you ever go into like a GameStop or something and just stand out and watch, it's really cool stuff. Just the advancements and just
Oh yeah.
it's really cool. At the car convention here in New York, they had an Oculus Rift hooked up to a driving game inside of a like actual simulator for real drivers. So the whole seat itself would shuffle and shake and stuff like that. And you know, you're in the Rift. It was really cool. People got really into it.
We are live, by the way.
This is recorded.
I don't know. I'm trying to work that out. I've never used
What
this.
can and cannot say, Jonathan?
Don't say the things that most people wouldn't say.
Yeah.
Jonathan,
Just imagine your mother's watching. Lois, she's still checking up on your.
you don't know. No, I think she's accepted me now.
Yeah. Warts and all.
But why?
Warts and all.
What? No.
It's a euphemism.
Yeah.
In
Imperfections.
England?
All right, my over-under was 7, so I had to call Boris at the last minute.
Hey,
Oh,
Hello.
dude.
It's the giant table.
I know. Adam, we were bigger.
Get closer.
We were a little optimistic. Hey, right, John. Did you listen?
Yeah. How's it going?
There you
We're live.
Excellent. Hello, people. We went Zoom online.
No, we've got 0 viewers.
Yeah.
Is it recording?
Yes, it should be.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a picture. TV? You are on TV. All right, we'll turn it around in a second. All right, awesome. Thanks for coming. Pretty much. Thanks. some sort of a prize. But in a very meta sort of way, that was sort of the point of tonight. It was we're going to ship it no matter what. We do have a couple of goals in mind, which even in this small meeting have been met. So, have a meeting, ship it, do something where we'd also brought in some people, not just in the office. So we wanted to start getting out into the community and see who's really doing this stuff, and not necessarily just talking about it or meetupping about it or tweeting about it. So. We wanted to ship something in August. We're calling this our summer vacation meetup. But starting in September, we want to do this every month and really share stories and talk to the community and see what's going on, see who's really running experiments. The topic for tonight was sort of just an excuse to get people in a room, but I think it actually, even in a small room, give you some compelling conversations. And it came from something that really happened actually in this room. Us getting into a debate with people at Pearson and what's okay to experiment on, what's not, what's pushing the envelope, what's the ends justify the means. So just kind of half an hour talking about that. First we'll go around the room, standard icebreakers, who you are, where you come from, why you're here, and maybe one line sort of like, so mine is like, the journey of a million miles starts with a single step. So you just got to start, you got to do something. Even if it's small, even if it's embarrassing, right? So that would probably be my icebreaker game. So some line like that, like an F it, ship it kind of line. What's your favorite?
A principle?
What's your favorite principle? Or
What can we say on this?
you can say you're on. Oh, and you are. We're recording this, so this is going out. I don't know about in real time, but we are recording this. So
We have 2 viewers.
Oh, we're up to 2. So F it, ship it. First, we'll start with you.
My name is Luis, product manager, Future Tech, Pearson. Just, we look at gaps in our product portfolio and try to accelerate some of the work in combination with some lines of businesses. My favorite principle is time is your most precious resource. Use it deliberately.
Does it have to be a favorite principle?
Now it
I was
does.
gonna try to link it back to shipping fast experiment, to the theme
Okay.
of tonight.
In that vein,
But you don't have to.
then I will link it to that. My name's Lee. I'm also a colleague of Pearson. I work on the learning and development team, and I'm going to be working on program creation. So not much the product development side, but wanting to incorporate similar principles into how we develop programs at Pearson. And I guess my principle would be shit or get off the pot.
Nice. Matt, have we ever can you bleep stuff out?
We're all adults
That's pretty
here.
tame. Yeah.
That's pretty awesome.
So I'm August Gressens. I'm actually in technology at Scholastic, but I have a very great interest in lean product development and product development from a technology side. And I'm interested in everything, this lean thing. So I've just started coming to some startups. My favorite concept is failing fast.
Fantastic. My name is Verma. I work at a company called Alpha UX, which is a platform for enterprise product teams to provide them with meaningful insight throughout the product development cycle. My philosophy is just make it real enough to get feedback quickly.
All right. Jonathan Burtfield. I'm also at Pearson, and I'm a member of the product lifecycle coaching team, helping business units and product teams across the company kind of roll out the product lifecycle and change the way they operate. Our principle, be a starter and a finisher. Is maybe something that comes to mind. Some people I know who are entrepreneurs are better starters than finishers, and so. But I think it's experimenting is about starting and executing is about finishing. And I think they need to go hand in hand. So.
It's interesting because I was just thinking of the quote that was going around the office, which was stop starting and start finishing. But I guess today is actually sort of the opposite of that.
It's starting.
So I guess I'll go debate myself.
Yeah.
You should see their interaction in the office. It's like an emerging podcast where like, yeah, I would agree. I don't know. I'm seeing a new thing starting here.
Yeah.
I think it's called a bromance.
Yeah.
All right, I'll go. I remember that I did my quote, but I did not say who I was or introduce myself. Adam Burke. I work with this guy and across from them, coaching teams inside Pearson to run experiments. And so this meetup, like I said, we wanted to start doing things in the community, but this specific topic came from something I was coaching a team and pushing them really hard, to run an experiment and test it this way, and got a lot. You could never test that. What if they get pissed off, or what if when they find out it's not real, or we can never test that it's not right. We have to build the whole thing. So my philosophy is there are the ethics of wasting money to build something that nobody necessarily needs or hasn't asked for or might not work is not necessarily more ethical than running an experiment on real people. So that's, even if we spend 30 solid minutes talking, that's sort of what I wanted to talk about tonight. That's where it came from.
I'm Boris. I currently work with Humana, health insurance company, and I help make design experiments to enterprise goals in various ways. And I guess philosophy, I can only think of anti-philosophy, those who can do teach. I kind of think it's the other. I believe in it, but the other way around. I think teaching is awesome, and people necessarily have to do teach. So.
Cool. All right, where should we start? Should we start on actual experiments, an actual trial? I think, given the maybe spin this around. That's your computer. Maybe just put it somewhere. Are you actively running experiments at Scholastic?
Well, I'm working on a different type of transformation project, which is around engineering test-driven development. So I'm going through a similar process to you guys. I'm trying to work with teams of engineers to introduce this practice, which changes the way they need to think about writing software. And so it's interesting, right? I mean, especially in these big companies where you have these sort of people that have been here a long time, they're used to working the same way. So I'm interested in these kinds of issues of how you approach them and how you can kind of try to change that mindset. Sounds like you've run into like something similar here, where there's this sort of static notion of the product as being this thing that's completely defined ahead of time, it's more of a waterfall process of upfront process of defining that big thing and then building it and then shipping it, right? You guys are trying to change the methodology around that to encourage experimentation and questioning all the assumptions that are implicit in defining this big thing, right? In smaller iterations. Is that right?
In general, I definitely say that that's right. Yeah, you want to answer that question, and then we'll follow up with yes.
Yeah, I think what we talk about a lot is that it's not necessarily about the size of the thing. It's not necessarily about the prescribing focus, more kind of not falling into the pattern of knowing, and more shaping ourselves up to be learners whenever we're building something big or small, whether it's about engineering or it's about product side or marketing or sales. It's testing before we execute. And so the nature of those experiments, the nature of that cultural shift is more important than the kind of the specifics of what exactly is being tested.
Starting with something small that is a working thing that you get feedback on and then can iterate on, right? That's an important, like same thing in software development too. This test-driven development encourages writing small pieces of code, testing those things, and then refactoring it and adding more. But I mean, I think the problem of how you change the culture and the mindset and people's thinking around that in established organizations is really hard, right?
Why? That's sort of where why are people afraid to ship early in small pieces?
Why are they afraid to? Because the entire system that I've encountered is you're punished for admitting that you don't know something. This is what I've seen. Absolutely. Most definitely. All the rhetoric says we should fish it, test, all the behavior that I've seen so far is a reward to help. Tell me that we're going to make a lot of money. Don't show me anything that contradicts that conversation.
Yeah, so failure is something to be avoided and not to be learned from.
Correct.
Right? It's a bad thing.
Exactly. Because I think fundamentally, most people at companies just want to press their buttons. Really, that's the main driver. Right. So there was a conversation, and I won't go into obviously the specifics since this might be published. But supposedly there was a story in which
it is being published.
That's what I'm saying. Therefore, I'm not going to specifics. But for example, in one situation, we were looking at technology that uses facial recognition technologies to actually determine pain points or highlights, emotional highlights of a person. Right. So this company came in for a very particular product we were developing, or not us, but at the company. Paid, engaged, and the results came back really ugly. And they literally canceled the contract. Okay, thanks, we're done. They went forward anyways. And they just kind of shoved it under the rug, right? And to me, that was saying that there is no willingness there's no appetite for failing, or at least an admittance of not knowing something, which is human nature.
So being punished for learning even when the truth hurts kind of thing, like.
Well, I think there's a short-termism around impact to the brand. Right? People are very afraid that if the brand is associated with anything other than unbridled success, that it's somehow going to affect their capacity to continue to operate. So, anything which is publicly clear as a failure, there's a lot of shame around that.
So this is why I'm fascinated with, what's his name, Power of Habit. Who wrote the book Power of Habit? Do you know what I'm talking about? basically makes the argument that a culture is merely the summation of habits, right? And all you're really arguing then is that there's no habits in place that actually support the behavior you're talking about. So unless you actually address and change habits, you're never actually going to address culture.
Yeah, that's good.
So, but there's something. I'm stuck right there. I get too excited about these
No,
things.
it's good. That's
No,
why you're
it's-
here.
Yeah, they got me drunk first, and they're like, "Oh, fucking speak up publicly."
Nothing is censored other than that.
Oh, okay.
No, I think it is a cultural thing. It is a cultural thing from the top down in large organizations, right? People won't talk about those kind of slip-ups.
So, are you guys familiar with Bridgewater Hedge Fund? Do you know their whole culture there?
Yeah.
Oh my God, why isn't that normal? That's a better question.
Explain it.
Yeah.
I'm not
What is
familiar.
it?
Yeah, how would you explain it for us?
Just completely open, 100%, everything's discussed. Again, you talk about it, you're not allowed to talk about another person unless they're in the room, conversation or call before it.
You can search anyone's email.
You can, yeah, you just completely open, just completely, I don't know, do they see each other's salary then?
Yeah. So they call it something called. There are two things that they like fundamentally advise, like radical transparency and the idea of meritocracy, right? Where there is an expectation there that you speak up. It doesn't matter if you're a junior analyst there. Like if you think your boss is incompetent, you say it publicly and you ground it in evidence and reasons to support them and then hash it out. Experience it for a little bit. It kind of puts you on edge at first, where you're like, whoa, people just are saying these things. On the walls when you show up, there is like people's work on the walls and saying, crap, bullshit, like terrible, fire this person, you name it, it's all up in the air. And supposedly you talk to the teams and what they're saying is that there's a relief that that's actually when you start to create a culture of a willingness to try something and stress test. They follow 5 things, right? They hire people that work for themselves at the end of the day, right? That 2 can independently muster up the most independent thoughts possible. 3 are willing to find the smartest people to stress test everything. 4 are weary of being overconfident. And 5, reflect often with this belief that pain plus reflection equals progress, right? Like everything you guys talk about, this experiment lean culture, like I see it there, or at least I get that impression. But again, it's such a minuscule example. Like at what point are we being idealistic? And how realistic is everyone actually capable of embracing this type of culture? Or are we being foolish in its pursuit?
Can you retrofit that culture though?
How so?
Like, I think a culture like that can be created if you have a visionary leader and you organically build people. But if you have an established culture, then trying to embed that, any form of change is going to be really painful.
Yeah.
Why embedding new things is very difficult is because you get rewarded on doing pretty much what you did yesterday. But your job is to do what you did yesterday. Ideally, marginally better, but if you've built a whole career and you've got a salary for doing something, the most likely thing you're going to do tomorrow at work is that thing, rather than try overhaul and do. So it's
Yeah, I think when you're in enterprise, actually probably going to be that large company, but there's so much established process. I think it's realistic to say that we can't single-handedly change behaviors, right? So I agree with it, not necessarily to have it, but I think a culture is a result of behaviors, right? So there's nothing ephemeral, it's just a bunch of behaviors and processes, people, it happens, probably a better way to describe it. So you go in and you go, I'm gonna do new stuff today, well, everything else down the stream from you is gonna break, if it's gonna be just you. So I think we're asking people to do, ideally you wanted to make a lot of changes, but once the organization is established, I'm just thinking out loud, I don't know if there's a way to say, you change, because you can't.
So my question becomes, do you guys know of any example where this culture has changed?
But this culture has changed.
Like, you guys are bad, producing, operating in a negative way. You should be experimenting, learning, failing driven. Are there examples, I'm assuming?
Well, there are some classic examples. Intuit is a place where the leadership developed that culture.
But that's the thing, I think that's the key, right? So the leadership at the very top, it has to come from the top of an organization. Like you can't be like, oh yeah, we're gonna just be smarter than everybody else and better because you're just not gonna be accepted by the immediate adjacent group of people. I've seen that. I've seen a company, mid-sized company, where they would bring outside help, and they would train the entire company. So everybody would get in. I mean, but they could do it because they had a location, probably less than 100 people. So they could actually go in and say, everybody, look, we're doing this now.
How many people work at that? What's it called?
Bridgewater.
So Bridgewater is the most successful financial firm in history. They have 1,000 employees, so they own more. They like double the assets that Goldman Sachs does with a 40th the employee size. They're considered obviously. They predicted every major trend and they capitalized off every downturn, upturn, you name it. They've just executed. And the reason when you talk to them or you learn about their culture, they're like, we're not unwilling to breach any issue and topic and force each other to stress test the quality of our work.
It's very much they're built on every problem is solvable. If you can strip it apart, then you can rebuild it. So they, whilst most hedge funds are making random guesses, they'll go, this variable affects this, and we'll try to test it through.
So there was one video that showed where it was a conversation they recorded just as the economy had tanked in 2008, 2009. And they saw their reports and they were up like 20% profit. It's like, no one has achieved this, right? Everyone's cheering around, and then Ray Dalio, the CEO, just like shuts everyone up and is like, stop it, we're done. Where are we gonna be wrong on that? It just immediately jumps into the issue of constantly being over-weary. They're leery of celebrating anything. That's just a cool, so when I hear experiments from you guys, what I'm really hearing is a willingness to stress test something, right? And I just don't think that's a human nature. It's built or honed in, or how do you even develop an appetite for it?
I think it is human nature. I think
To tinker or an experiment.
Well, experiments can be quite broad. So just say I'm cooking a meal for strangers. I will first begin to ask questions to, what do you guys want to eat? That's like a survey. That's a very elementary form of experimentation. Then I might cook something, whatever it is, some portion of the meal, maybe just the main or the dessert or the starter, or maybe even just tell people, I'm thinking of baking this with this ingredient, what do you reckon? And they'll be like, I don't know.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Why do you care in the end? Why do people care about surveying or asking other people? I'm not trying to, I'm just trying to get like, what's the intended outcome of trying to survey everyone?
I think surveys, it's a starting point. You should never build anything off a survey. It's self-reported, but you just want to, it's like, I've got 20 ideas, how am I going to prioritize which one to even go with? So I think that's where a survey comes in handy. Like, what are the 5 most important things? Prioritize these features on a phone. Okay. Let's begin testing if your number 1 actually holds true. So it's just I think every experiment is just a prioritization thing.
Your question, like, why is survey particular as a format?
Well, no, kind of the idea of, like, in the example you showed about, like, you're surveying your friends or something. My argument is at the end of the day, it's to appease for like social acceptance. I think we're social creep. I really do fundamentally think a huge driver for us is just social acceptance, appeasing whatever environment you're in or a situation. And I never try to forget that and ask questions or run an experiment or how people make purchasing decisions in business events, right? I don't know. I always wonder, at the end of the day, in the back of my mind, I just want to impress someone.
Well, if you want them to purchase and use your product.
But right, let's say you are being asked to, like, someone comes to you like, hey, you should buy 5,000 of these computers for your company because they're XYZ benefits, right? Like, I feel like fundamentally the person that has the decision to choose, say yes or no, is like, what does my boss think, right? I guess what I'm trying to get at is, I think the reason culture is so difficult to change is because in many institutions they're built on the idea of appeasement and pleasing some sort of hierarchy system. Right? That's all. And why I'm so fascinated by the Bridgewater culture is that they strip that out. That is the one that is frowned upon, is the appeasement or willingness just to appease someone. They try to scrutinize the quality of the work itself as opposed to the social reasons behind it.
Go ahead, Bruce.
I was just saying, yeah, I think it's great. Yeah, I think it's a great undercurrent. And if you look at the flip side, which is enterprise sales, who do you sell to? You don't sell based on what the company actually needs, based on what Bob wants
Yeah.
to look at, to appear as, or what his personal interests are. I think it's ultimately you're selling to the person. And that's why, of course, there's huge percentage of people at enterprises buy and what they actually could ideally use. It's that. So it's like it's recognized and it's leveraged for billions and billions of dollars in sales because that's how organizations work.
I've been wondering if some of the disconnect is just around where a lot of these established products are in their life cycle. You know, they're in like the exploit phase, and they've been in the exploit phase for 30 years or something, you know, especially with a lot of the traditional, you know, publishing products that are made by Pearson or companies like Scholastic. So the people that innovated on those products and got them to where they are to be profitable are dead, or, you know, they're long gone, and the people that are there are just kind of manning the machinery. So, you know, they don't necessarily have that mindset, right? That should come with like digital product development. I think a lot of this is really about the introduction of digital product development and all the technology and the change that's bringing in, ushering in, right? Like at a big company like Pearson. Like, isn't that what this is really about with what you guys are doing? Is it about digital product development, or is it about product development in general?
First, I'll ask you what the exploit phase is, because we saw something similar today, so just to go back.
The exploit phase would just be a mature, proven business model and
Which is
product.
literally from people like listening or when we cut up the
Oh, I'm
quotes
sorry.
there, like, is it from someone's book? Is it from like,
Oh yeah,
I know a lot of
enterprise.
times we throw Eric Ries's name around just so
Okay.
people want to follow up on it.
I think I picked this up in Lean Enterprise. It talks about the product portfolio and the different phases of product
So what
development.
would be all the phases in that? Not just,
I don't remember all of
Yeah,
them.
quiz.
I don't remember.
Right,
all
so
of them.
we'll go
But there's
back.
sort of like the early phase where you're kind of doing a lot of testing and
Yeah.
experimentation, and where it actually talks about these ideas of failure and how they're less acceptable. And actually failure is more risky for an established product than one that hasn't been established, right? So, and there's sort of almost like different cultures that go along with those things. But I'm thinking about these really big companies, like these big publishing companies that have established products that have been around for years, and there's really been no need for any kind of culture of innovation there, because their business models have been proven, and it's just been business as usual for so long that no one can even remember what it was like to innovate. But now, with the introduction of digital, we need to be able to innovate again, right? And in order to compete in the marketplace. So
I don't think it's, certainly from a Pearson perspective, we're not solely focused on the introduction of digital into the universe as a driver for certainly experimentation or a cultural shift. It's much more about speed. The market moves much faster, competitors move much faster. A lot of that is powered by digital, but it doesn't mean that necessarily the products that are being delivered are always digital. Some of them are, services delivered by humans, and some of them are, still remain kind of very primitive digital, even if they are digital or super power charged. But I think the big issue for me around experimentation, from what you're describing at Bridgewater, and from what we do here, and from what I see other companies, the focus is really on evidence, and it's on evidence driving decision making, as opposed to power or gut instinct, or I've been around for 30 years, so therefore it's about abstracting the decision away from that human focus. It doesn't mean that that's completely abstract. It doesn't mean that like strategy and the wisdom and the knowledge of the market disappear. They need to be applied in concert with something much more powerful, which is data, or which is evidence. And that comes from experimentation and the capacity to open yourself up to say, my wisdom and my knowledge is not quite as important as what the market is saying, or our customers are saying, or what the data is saying. That's the cultural shift that happens. And it sounds like the Bridgewater example is a great way, where it's not idiots running a financial company and having success because they challenge each other. It's really super smart people who are able to marry kind of the benefit of testing stuff out, using that data, and then interpreting it.
But I think you're leading to something then that, I don't know if you guys have seen it, please let me know if you have. All right, let's say people are, we should be data driven, right? Look for disconfirming data, so to speak, right? I think that's what I'm interpreting here, sir. They don't know how. They don't know what good data is or bad data is. They see a number and they're like, fact. Have you seen this as well? Or what are your thoughts? How do you mitigate that?
I think that or seeing a number at all counts as data. So when you say something like, I want to think of an example, conducting a review to understand if a program at a company is an efficacious program or an effective program to yield the outcome that it wants to yield. I can say I'm going to go collect quantitative data on retention, but if that's not talking about the impact on the business, then it's just a number. It's still quantitative data, but it doesn't at all affect what I'm trying to test for. I think there's also an emotional attachment to our ideas. And that's something that I saw in my last role when I got a glimmer of early stage product development. And that was, there's a very deep emotional attachment to people that are very tied to that market and have been tied there for 30 years. And so they are market experts in that discipline. Therefore, they definitely know what the market needs at all times. And there is definitely a sense of failure if that idea wasn't pushed through. And I think in order to innovate in the way that you all are discussing, you have to detach the emotions from the ideas that you're generating.
So I guess then my question to you two is, at what point do you focus your energies on trying to convert everyone, or do you just get rid of them and find people who fit the culture? I know, so it says the couch guy in the room. But right, like you're in a situation where if you don't adapt, you die, right? Like we're fundamentally facing a time issue. Like at what point do you devote resources to believe in the person and change, or to just cut?
I don't think it's like getting them to change. It's quite ironic when you think about it. Like, and I think we were having this discussion a few weeks ago. It was that experimentation appears everywhere in life, but for some reason it doesn't happen in business. They walk through a door in the morning and it stops. They'll be on the golf course and they're content going to the driving range and smashing 100 balls. They're content missing the green. You know, if they were a stand-up comedian, they'll go to an open mic and rehearse.
Just talked about that.
If you know, they're cooking a meal, if they're learning a new sport, they do that always. If they're going to build a new house, they'll expect their architect to models. But they walk through the door and all bets are off. So I think culturally, the ability, it's there, but it's something not to do with the individual that's preventing this from happening. It's the incentive structure.
So yeah,
It's the structure, right? So most of the examples, actually all the examples we gave, you kind of control of what you're doing. Whereas you walk into an organization and now you're just a small part of the structure, so you're there. And, so if you were going to change, that's kind of what I'm saying, right?
But we're at a sporting team,
I
like,
was just gonna try to think of that.
That's the other thing. If you're in a soccer team and you experiment alone,
you're in the gym every time.
right?
Yeah.
You can experiment maybe like one small thing at a time. But
Yeah.
You're fairly constrained.
Yeah, the coach has some bearing on what happens on game day.
I think to your phenomenon, Bridgewater calls it impression management. That you have organizations that spend more time concerned about impression management than actually producing solid outcomes, right? Where their focus is on the output, and they don't know the difference between outputs and outcomes, and they focus on the former.
Yeah.
But I think it's also to do with stakes, right? So like, again, thinking about the sports example, right? The stakes are kind of a small moment in time, right? Inside of a game or a match or whatever. And like, let's try a different move, and we've experimented and see whether I can curl the ball around if I'm a soccer player or whatever. And I think what happens inside of organizations is people feel an existential level of stakes to experimentation, because experimentation, if it's done right, can result in failure. And therefore, if I do that, I'm going to lose my job and my livelihood, and therefore, my family, my rent, my mortgage, whatever is kind of directly connected to like that culture of experimentation if it's not accepted.
And the whole solution is not just pushing experimentation, but matching it with time, right? So in the World Series, you're not going to experiment with a new pitch, but you might in preseason, right? And as a chef, you're not going to experiment when the critic comes in. So it's not that experimentation is right all the time and every time for every audience, but it's making them feel comfortable. And that's sort of what we're saying at the beginning and explore, when we're saying when you're learning that it's okay, but knowing the difference between where the stakes are high and when the stakes are low. And I think that's sort of the job that we're all here to do, is that preserving the execution side and preserving the stuff that works and preserving the stuff where you said there's no reason to change. Is that true? But then somehow adding, the safe place.
It almost seems like in an organization, it's game day every day.
Right. That's.
But if you look at an athlete, if you count the hours that they're involved in preparing for game day as a fraction of their career, they're probably on the field for 20 hours a year. Like 30-hour football player.
Baseball might be a little higher.
Yeah, but
very well taken.
Like tons of hours for every one day.
Thousands of hours in the gym, in the pool, working on nutrition, trying different things. But suddenly in the organization, it's always game day. It's like
super interesting.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a question. I feel like an underlying assumption.
I think we're out to something. All right, he's gonna think for a second.
An underlying assumption of this entire conversation is that experiments equals better. Is there any situation where it's detrimental?
Yeah, when the risks are not. Yeah, when the critic is coming in that day, and you don't have the ability to fuck up.
And what does that translate into an organization?
Well, I was going to say it's about the stakes. It's like you want to do the maximum amount of experimentation when the stakes are low, and the minimum amount of experimentation when the stakes are high. So like when you've got, I don't know, in an educational context, when you've got a back to school product, right? You don't want to be experimenting with that product in July, because you've got to get a lot of ducks in a row so that when all those kids are signing on, or those students are in university or whatever is the thing, like they've got a solid, reliable product. But how do you do that? You don't hold your breath and avoid any testing until you get to July.
Right. And it makes sense mathematically, right? So the amount of risk that's going to affect your cash cow, right? If you expose it to interest, now you've got your entire business have a threat potential, right? You might have a big upside, but you look at the downside of it. I can't afford to take this risk.
Nobody's drawing that distinction though between low stakes season and high stakes season.
Well, here's the thing then, right? This is where I've seen a lot of problem, at least within our organization, is that the same person responsible for not taking risks is now being asked to take risks. Like the same individual person is responsible both for sustaining and growing, as opposed to, well, also be innovative and start building new ideas. I wonder how realistic it is to expect that same individual to code switch between the two mindsets, essentially.
So again, the answer might be not changing the person, but changing the sandbox. Just throwing that out there.
Then just one caveat to throw in is sometimes I think the stakes are small, so none of it should, I mean, it's maybe semantics, but certain things you just want to go and do, right? Something if you say like, okay, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the best, I don't know, exact shape of the water bottle is, or just this is good enough. For this party, we'll go with this one, because it's not going to make a difference. Whereas maybe the shape of the water bottle, and we're going to ship a million of them, then let's test it out and make sure it's the right quantity.
I think there's also a culture around if it's not the best product or if it's not the product that's gaining most of the market share, then it's still a failure. So good enough isn't good enough. It always has to be the best. And so there's not even a culture around experimenting with not products that would fail miserably, but products that will do just enough to get you relevant information. And on top of that, I think something I saw in a previous role was not having the culture around constant feedback and around allocating time to experimentation because you are just maintaining what's always worked. Because that's what makes you money.
The actual retrospective, I was gonna say that the retrospectives and actual culture, I think is probably the biggest driver of what that culture has. So it's a successful organization, with that frequently.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the biggest dangers, right? Is a legacy business making a statement that we need to continue doing what we've always done because that's our cash cow, right? Without putting the perspective of how do we know that we're actually maximizing our opportunity every single day that our product is out there, right? They're just making an assumption that the market has not changed, their competition has not changed, their customers have not changed. And if we continue to do it, we'll continue to get the same margins, the same revenue.
Because the alternative means to think. Contrary to popular belief, the human brain is not designed for thinking.
But doesn't the market demand, like if you're a public company, the market is demanding growth, the market is demanding maximizing opportunity, the market isn't saying stand still, right? And so the question is, well, how do you grow, right? The biggest risk that you are taking, the biggest experiment that you're running is if we do nothing, we'll just continue to grow because we've got a brand and we've got a legacy product, and therefore, that's an experiment. We're just not acknowledging it, right?
It's implicit.
Is it?
It's an implicit experiment, right?
I was just gonna say, is it an experiment? Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, but
Well-
the thing is, when you're at that scale, then you're getting into.
Well, it's an assumption that you're making, right, about your product it's not tested. That's
It's tested, it's almost not an experiment because you're not.
Well, it's not an
saying
experiment,
what your
but
outcome
it's
is.
more of like an assumption that is potentially creating risk, right? Because you're not, you're not testing that assumption. You're not saying to your customers, or looking at data that would indicate that you do need to evolve the product or change it in certain ways, right?
You're right. It's almost unfair to call it an experiment. It's only an experiment if you're observing it from the outside and looking at what people are doing and saying, well, let's see what happens there. Because the market will dictate whether it's a successful approach to what they're doing.
You're making an assumption about what your customers want, which you do when you've got a new product, right? But that's an explicit assumption that you're making. This is sort of implicit, right? It's almost like you could forget, you wouldn't be aware that you're making that assumption, which perhaps even makes it more dangerous, right?
This is the kind of stuff I was hoping.
But the reality of it is you're dealing with then 10 years of senior executives, right? So if you're sitting on a cash cow, your job really comes down to holding on to your job.
I promise you 20% growth on
Yeah,
EPS.
for a couple of years. So that's like Christensen's capitalist dilemma. Right? So then you focus on efficiency because you're encouraged to demonstrate numbers, but through cutting costs as opposed to creating revenue. And since they treated the same in the market,
Right.
you're basically encouraged to not innovate.
Right, so why is it so hard to disrupt yourself? Is it like is it a predictably irrational thing? Is it justified because you're just waiting, you're just outwaiting it, or is it is it rational or irrational to not disrupt yourself? If is it literally a matter of time and it's like, and you are not accountable, so you're just trying to wait it out, or is it actually irrational?
Well, I think
Does that make sense?
if we come down to two, pieces, maybe, right? One, I don't just resurface discussion, but one that changes to come from the top, and two, the top wants to sit there for a couple of years and get out, with hopefully nothing changes, making that assumption, right? Like I'm gonna assume that nothing's gonna change while I'm here.
Do they not change because they don't think they're going to be disrupted, or do they literally believe?
I mean, you're playing numbers, right? What are the chances you're going to be disrupted in your 3-year tenure?
Right, so that's sort of I guess that's what.
Right, what is it, the COPP was like, oh, why me, right? Because all he had to do is all that mess of the developers that happened.
So that's what's so
Yeah,
fascinating.
So is it just a game of musical chairs, or are they saying, I know, and they're just
Yes,
pushing it off?
I think that's Brett, that's what I'm getting at, right?
Or, and they don't want to be the last one stuck, and they're just saying, there's a 9 out of 10 chance that I'm not gonna be stuck holding the mortgage-backed securities? Or are they literally saying, no, this is
What I'm
great?
saying is, if those two things are true, then that's like a system that's locked in, right? So the change can only come from the top, and the top won't change pretty smooth, right?
Until someone else.
But I'm
you
just
can
saying,
only
like,
do that
so we
if
have to
you're
find
not-
other avenues.
If you're not getting any feedback from your customers, right? If you're not engaging your users and your consumers, right? You could only kind of live in that little bubble of things that, I can just ride it out and not make that assumption. I mean, in both cases, building your own product in your own bubble without talking to your customers and doing that, they're kind of the same thing, really.
So then is it just 3 years of declining revenue is the only thing, or that will make people change?
No, I find it hard to believe that any company that was disrupted didn't see it writing on the wall. I don't think this is a situation where they didn't already know what was happening and where they were losing market share. The question I come back to is like, why isn't something done about it? And I constantly defer back to this idea of, well, I just need to not get fired for the next 3 years or something. And maybe that's an oversimplification, but
So going back to the sporting analogy, what would happen if you played sport without an audience?
Very interesting.
What would change? Is I think that's what an organization is. It's so removed from its customer. I've worked a lot with exec teams on trying to get them to mindset change, and the only thing that ever works is when you put the customer in the room and it's them telling them. Because they can say no to a trainer, and they do, very vocally, but they can't say no to a customer. And a sports person can't yell at a fan. They can yell at everyone else. They can blame anyone, but they won't yell at a fan. And I think organizations exist like a game of football played without an audience. And it's because there's not that two-way feedback, because it's like everyone trying to impress everyone. I'm trying to impress you with my products. It's not the purpose of an organization. The purpose of an organization is to solve a problem that a customer has, is to bring them in so early that they're bought into not only your end product, but the whole journey, the process, the story, the narrative. But I think it's always like a surprise. Nah, we didn't work. Surprise again. Nah. So I think it's how can there be a dialogue between customers and leadership, and customers and every employee? I used to work in management consulting, and we used to build customer strategy. Do you know how many times we talked to a customer? Never. Never.
how cool would it be? Yeah, like even with Chris, imagine if like every product owner, manager, whatever, like had a relationship with the school where they had to teach a course using that product for like 1 week in the day or something. How good, like, or the stories about Kayak where the calls go directly to the engineers.
Yeah.
They just get so tired of answering calls, they fix the problem right away.
Right.
Or alt school.
That's a great, that's the kind of stuff I want. Like I know Meetup, and the example I always use is Meetup, there's supposedly a shift in their best metric, like the day they started, doing regular, talking to customers regularly. That's a cool one. I've never heard. So who's got more stories like that?
Well, alt school. Have you guys heard of alt school? Do you know what this is?
Yeah.
Oh my god, I love those guys. I mean, all right, so they got like $144 million of funding from like Facebook and a few other VC funds, right? And their whole model is basically progressive education model. Kids come in and they drive their own learning. It's amazing, right? What's so scary for Pearson, and I think is awesome, they have a 50-person engineering and development team embedded in the school site. Like the engineers are sitting in the back of the classroom, listening to the teacher lecture, whatever, and like the teacher will like go over to the engineers like, this is not working right now. Pop up the code and fix it within minutes.
Wow.
Right? It's just like it broke down all barriers between engineering and the customer as it's happening in real time, right? Like they're actually adjusting in the process. And that's why I think they're building one of the coolest platforms that are just leaps and bounds ahead of it.
So who else is, so like Amazon's known for like running millions of experiments every like millisecond. So everyone thinks that they're just good at commerce and logistics, but what other companies are really, really good at running experiments and going fast. I think that was the key too. It's not just that they're listening to customers, and it's not just that they're running experiments, but they're also doing it lightning fast. So it's those three things together.
Yeah.
Customer speed, you were saying speed before, right? It's customer speed and experimentation and data, not gut. Who else has a cool? We're at the fun part of the night. We got through our threshold of having some really smart stuff. Who's got some more really good examples of companies that are doing stuff
I think
like
that's
that?
an amazing example of bringing engineers.
Yeah, I do too.
Right? I mean, that's kind of like collapsing
That's
the
what I'm
whole.
Well, that's why I'm searching.
Can you
all
imagine being
the
sure?
walls are down.
I agree.
Three
That's-
personal
that's-
developers in
yeah.
your classroom. You're like, hey guys, fix this right now. Within minutes, it's fixed.
What I also love about it is those developers are also pushing the code into production.
That's
It's
my,
not
yeah,
like
that's what I'm saying.
and passing it to a QA person who's got to do that. There's no
Right.
There's no time for that, right? Like
But at the same time, nothing's getting lost in translation.
Mhm.
Can you imagine
And it
stuff
needs to
that
get
goes
fixed.
through? But can you imagine the stuff that goes through technical support at large companies, and it's not the same issue that the customer was complaining about by the time it gets to the person who's
Musical
actually going to
chairs.
fix
Or
it?
no, what's the phone game? What's the phone game?
Telephone. Yeah.
Telephone.
Yep. That's my favorite. Everyone's seen Office Space where he's yelling at you. He's like, "What do you do?" Well, I take the specs from the customer. I'll play the scene. But have you, everyone seen the movie
no, I haven't seen it.
Office Space? Can you do this scene?
Everyone keeps telling me. to see it.
All right, I'll send this. I'll post the scene on the meetup page. It's really good.
Reading the video.
Yeah, I think that one. I seriously wish like we would have $50 million in Pearson and just open up a school that's what we do. Like, yeah, like our code's embedded with our engineering. I saw it, I got so depressed, and he said at the same time, I didn't know what to do. I was just like, oh.
Give me an example.
If I get
I
fired,
feel like
that's
you're,
what I'm gonna
you're a, I
Right.
right. Put you on the spot, but were you? Do you have any examples of that?
I'm trying to think of the one that I can back up with some.
I feel like
knowledge.
Zappos probably does stuff like that, but I can't think of anything off the top of my
I
head.
know a lot of large organizations confuse customer service and customer
Yes,
centricity.
I agree with
They're like, we treat our customers well, we listen, we do
Yeah.
exactly what they want.
Yeah.
And that's the total opposite, is you're designing for an individual.
Mhm.
You're not designing for, a market.
Mhm.
And I think I could see organizations misinterpret that and over-service instead of change their philosophy to design.
They're definitely two different things.
Yeah.
I get scared sometimes when I say over customer service isn't a good thing. They're definitely two different things.
Yeah.
That do two different jobs.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can ever be too good at customer service, but some people might say maybe you can.
Kind of if it doesn't make it, it's not scalable.
Yeah, it's
If
not-
it comes at the expense of
Sure.
other clients, other customer
Sure,
groups.
absolutely.
But I think like for the old school example, right? Obviously they're not gonna be able to do that with every
Yeah.
product. Should they grow? And obviously, but they're very adamant. They're like, we're in the experiment phases of this idea of progressive education platform.
Mm.
That if we can get it right here by these, no one can beat the rate of their experiments. I can't think of any other model that would actually experiment faster and more accurately than that. But let's say they hit on something, now you've had something that's tried and true, right?
Yeah.
And then you start weaning off the experiments, I suppose.
It should be an interesting thing, like, should experimentation be a phase? Everyone talks about the
I
experimentation
know.
phase.
Like what you experiment on should be phase specific. But experimentation should not be a phase.
Yeah, the behavior should continue throughout, but it's what you're experimenting on.
And it's also just that cliche of like, exploration versus optimization.
Yeah.
So the stakes should go down.
Mm.
The types of thing you're experimenting on, you should have more knowns now than
Yeah.
unknowns. That you're experimenting on boulders, not.
What if you replace the word experimentation with learning?
Yeah.
Is it like, should it be a decline in learning as a product evolves? Or should it just,
It should probably flatten,
Why?
and then you should. Well, because there's actually, and this isn't mine. At some point, when you start learning, wasn't this one of 10 Days Talks or someone? It's like you have there's a finite thing that you don't know, and as you learn, you reach that. It doesn't. It's not like a lockstep thing where it
And then
automatically
John was saying,
extends. Like you're gonna.
the unknown starts to creep up because things change.
Not-
So 3 photos unknown now.
Not necessarily. I
Right.
think you have to design for like a new local maximum. I think you can start saturating your local learnings.
Well, I think there's a distinction between
Over time.
Well, there's a distinction between the amount of learning that you need to do for a particular product that's in the market, and at some point you're going to reach like a point where it's not worth investing in additional learnings because you're just like the returns are going to be diminished. But it doesn't mean that you stop learning about the market and the opportunity because you just shift the focus.
Yeah, but you can use that product too. Then you can use that product in the market as a way to get feedback.
Right.
So now you're just generally learning about the market specifically. So in a sense, you are experimenting by having it there.
You have one more thing?
No, I didn't.
All right, I have one cool thing on your sports thing, and then we'll maybe get
Yeah.
into actual experiments that we run together. And we can pretty much call it a night after that. So I'm assuming most people at this table are Freakonomics fans.
Yes.
So there's a really interesting study, and correct me if I'm wrong or if you've heard this before, when you said, what if fans played with no sports? So supposedly someone did a study where soccer or football, you feel like this, you should know this, football players for penalty shots, if you aim dead center, you have a higher likelihood of scoring. So and this is why when people why don't people just behave on data? So what's the reason? Why wouldn't penalty kickers always kick it directly at the center if the odds of scoring are higher?
Impression management. If they kick the center and it's blocked,
Highlight
look
rate.
way
Anybody
worse.
but you,
Oh,
right?
sorry. It's impression management. That's my argument all along, guys.
So that was sort of why I asked the rational question
Sorry.
before. So it's like, it's completely rational to go with something that has lower reward because the risk of hitting could not only be ridiculed, you could be killed. Like in a mob scene, like if you aim directly at the goalie and that's when it gets blocked, even though the odds are your favor, the fans don't give a shit that the odds are your favor. You look like an idiot. And the kicker is factoring that in, I would say somewhat rationally. And I think some of that actually happens in business. It's like there's no reason to rely on the data. Because if you mess up with something that looks really bad, like kicking it right at the goalie, you might be carried out of your business by like an angry mob. That's not cool.
But we'll see the ultimate experiment in like politics next year. It's just daily experiments. It's the way the way Republican candidate will be picked is an experiment.
Yeah.
It's like, let's just put a whole heap of crazy people in.
John Oliver.
Let's see who shoots themselves.
They're running experiments. Don't apologize for anything.
See how that works out.
Yeah, say outrageous things, but never apologize. That's an experiment.
All right, we'll come full circle. Everything you wanted to experiment on, but we're scared to.
Not scared. I'm probably getting fired at some point. I'm like, let's just do it. I don't know. There's feedback I once heard from a mentor that I really live by. It's like find and surround yourself with people that understand the differences between outputs and outcomes and are ruthless about the matter. Right? Where all they care about is actually performance, and they build a team around that model. Right. So recently, we're experimenting on a particular prototype with supposed confidential partnerships, stuff like that. But I'm just like, all right, let's totally do this. So I had like the name up, everything. Like, how am I actually going to like get some traction behind that? And not even thinking about it. Right before I published, someone else came around and was like, whoa, no, they would be so mad if they found out. It's just, I wanted to just go out and just get it done, but ended up not wasting. That's not word. Correct. Ended up having to go through multiple chains of command in order to get the green light to somehow put something in the public space to test some hypotheses. I found that very frustrating. Yeah, that page that's up now, the amount of time it took me to get to that point and like permissions I had to get signed off.
So you don't have to call anything out specifically, but so to put up an unbounce or a landing page.
To put up a landing page to test hypotheses about our like customer segments or what we thought might be, I had to go through this idea of just like everyone was concerned about the impression of what would it be.
Right, so that's sort of what I was getting at. Obviously, you had no hesitations personally.
No. Oh,
So, but what were their actual fear? I mean, I think this is real important stuff. Like, Were they scared of the brand? Were they scared of lawsuits? Were they scared of people's feelings? Were they scared of it not working? Did they think that the product just physically had to exist, that like even if you did all those things and launch it, that the data just wouldn't be reliable because the product doesn't exist?
I think, from my understanding, there was a fear about what their boss would think, and that kept going up until, and the assumption was that the boss would be angry that it could deteriorate potential conversations with the potential partner.
I think there's a fine line there. I mean, knowing some of the specifics of that situation, there are legitimate fears that are known by some about relationship management, and they sometimes translate to legitimate restrictions on what you should experiment with.
I'm glad you brought it up, because I would have just been like, publish!
Right, and it's important to know the distinction between those two. You can't be completely, blasé about it, but it's often taken to the extreme.
And to be fair, I don't suppose that was an extreme situation, but I think this is the most recent example of where it just,
Ask for forgiveness or for permission, pick one, why, in under 15 seconds. We know your answer, but why?
Why?
Yeah, it's fun. It's the last thing of the night.
It's because of the advice that I heard once. Be concerned about outcomes. And look, and all the decisions I make, they're never malicious. They're never intended to go over someone. It's like all the decisions are, I believe this is the best way to achieve this intended outcome. And then I just come across impression management issues and politics, and this will be my lifelong struggle, I suppose.
Something you wanted to test, or something you've always wanted to know but were afraid to find out, or couldn't even think of a way to test it quickly. Go off the rails a little bit. It can be in life. I heard you giggling. It can be in life or in work or professional.
What does it feel like if I put my finger in this socket? Always wanted to know that.
See,
I take you've actually personally tried that?
Of course, who didn't do
Have
that
you
as a
did you
kid?
really as a kid?
Yeah, totally.
Nice. Well, that's a whole other topic. Like the modern, what's the free range movement about raising kids? Like we've moved away from letting kids make those kinds of mistakes and get hurt.
Right.
Just allowing them to do it?
Oh, but that answers your question before. Even I'm a crazy experiment, but things that you have to do, you weigh the risk, and if death is a real risk, I don't
That
want to.
speaks back to the fallacy of the human brain, right? We have a total inability.
Well,
to
that is a very good
risk.
question: is how do you actually measure what the true risk is versus what the perceived risk is? But yes, if the real risk is higher than 1% death.
But the parenting example is a good model for how enterprises work, right? That parents overestimate the likelihood of death. They overestimate the likelihood of being kidnapped in a playground because they listen to the news or they do whatever. When the reality is, very few kids actually get kidnapped from playgrounds, and there are very few molesters. But
and they also underestimate the value of letting them play on the playground.
Yeah.
And so they underestimate the reward and overestimate the risk, which is why every single experiment doesn't get on.
It's relative though. Risk is a very relative thing. I remember watching a documentary about a free rock climber who faced death, he wasn't bound by anything. And they asked him, "Why do you do this?" And he goes, "The scariest thing for me is working in an office every day." It was his version of risk was very different.
Minimum success criteria: 30 people.
Bye-bye now.
15 from Pearson, 10 from Pearson, 20 not from Pearson.